Welcome everyone to another week in motorsport. Something pretty special must have happened over the weekend, because today I'm not only joined by Rob Widdows, the features editor, but also the editor of Motorsport magazine, Damien Smith. Today we'll be trying to cram in as much opinion and insight on the Monaco Grand Prix and Indianapolis 500 as possible. Also, at the end of the recording, I'll be asking Damien and Rob some of your questions, so do keep watching. The Monaco Grand Prix, we have so much to discuss here, but Damien, were we robbed of an amazing finale to that race when the red flag came out and they could put new tyres on the cars?
Yes, we were. I think Alonso fancied his chances of taking the lead and taking the win, and Jensen fancied the chances of the two of them taking each other out, I think, and taking the win. So
he was driving with crossed fingers, wasn't he?
He was, I think. Yeah, I think the red flag rule about changing tyres on the grid. Bit of a problem with that. I think that needs to be looked at and possibly changed. You can understand why, for example, Lewis's rear wing needed to be fixed, and once you get into safety precautions with damaged bodywork, etc., I think it's hard to stop teams working on the cars in terms of setup. But in terms of tyres, I think they should have finished on their final set of tyres.
But surely this is one of those points that we haven't had a problem with at all recently, because the Pirelli tyres and the different compounds and the tyres that degrade quickly is such a new thing. Having a red flag at that stage of the race is obviously, Rob, I'll pose this to you. I mean, Damien said that the rule needs to be looked at. Is that the case? How quickly do we need to change it? Because surely that's a one-off.
Yeah. Well, hello everybody. I'm going to tread a bit carefully in the presence of my editor for obvious reasons.
Very wise.
However, I'm becoming as confused about 2011 Formula One as clearly McLaren and Red Bull are confused. I wondered actually whether the extraordinary messy pit stops were due to having a day off on between practice and qualifying. I wondered if it had really just upset their whole kind of zone, if you like. Anyway, but yes, I do think we were robbed. We was robbed, as they say in football, of a great finish. We were. It was good. It was a thrilling last few laps, wasn't it? And as good a Monaco Grand Prix as I've ever seen. Although I do find the current rules rather confusing, and all the tyres but anyway, and I was very much hoping that we would see a car other than a Red Bull win the race, not because I don't like Red Bull, but just because I want to see a great championship.
Yeah, we could have done with a different result in terms of the championship, that's for sure. But I think Vettel is he's not only driving the fastest car in qualifying, but also has the luck with him at the moment, as well as the right strategy calls at the right time. So when a man's on top, it's hard to beat.
Something that did come out of the weekend, though, talking about people who are hard to beat, Lewis Hamilton certainly wasn't that this weekend, was he? I mean, what on earth was going on, Damien? He was crashing into people during the race, criticising the stewards afterwards. I mean, we all applaud his, race at all costs attitude, but surely he's overstepped the mark this weekend.
Yeah, I've been thinking long and hard about this, reading comments on our website from readers and seeing what other commentators and other journalists are writing in the newspapers. My feeling on it is that in terms of the two incidents, Lewis was out of order. First of all, I think both cases he deserved to get penalised for. I think his reaction after the race, born of frustration, but it came across as petulant, and he lacks style and grace in those situations. I think apologies to both Massa and Maldonado would have been a much better way to handle it, and I think he's made a bit of a fool of himself, I think, in terms of the reaction to those incidents. I think we all admire his racing spirit and his talent. There's no doubting that side of him at all. At Monaco he's usually fantastic. I've seen him win there in GP2 and in Formula 1, and he's a tremendous talent. But I think he has to think a bit harder before he speaks. I know it was, they say he was frustrated and hot-headed after the race, but he's old enough and he's been around long enough now to know how to handle himself.
Yeah, Rob, Damien touched on it there. Maldonado, what a shame for him, because he had such a great weekend when, personally, I think he struggled a bit this season with the Williams. But a great weekend for him, and so sad that Williams lost out on some very, very important points.
Yes, very sad, because that's a team that really needs success right now. Not only just points, but it needs success to pep them up, get them back where they want to be, and raise the morale up, And Maldonado drove very well, I thought. I really did. I was very impressed. I mean, it's dead easy to hit something in Monte Carlo, as Lewis and others showed us. But can I just quickly make a point about Lewis Hamilton, if I may? We all want racers, and we all want people who speak their minds. Well, my goodness me, we've got that in Lewis Hamilton. He's a hell of a racer, and he speaks his mind, and now we're complaining about it. I'm a bit uneasy about that. I'm sorry. I agree he was a bit careless about what he said, but hey, as somebody who's a bit careless about what they say sometimes too, I can understand that. He is a fantastically competitive bloke, and I think he was just boiling over with frustration.
Yeah, I see Rob's point. I mean, the Ali G thing, for example, I couldn't care less about that. I mean, it was a bit of a bad joke, which he probably shouldn't have said, but it doesn't matter that he said it. I think we just move on and forget about that. But I just think it's one thing being outspoken, it's another thing being wrong.
It's okay. I will admit the guy does need to learn to lose. Okay, that's what we all have to learn to lose, don't we? All of us do, in whatever job we're doing, because we can't win everything every day. We try to, but we can't. But I just don't want to hear too many complaints about a racing driver who speaks his mind and a racing driver who wants to overtake and win a race. That's all I'd say.
No, and I'd agree that the media can be guilty of jumping on to someone as soon as they utter a word, and David Coulthard's made a point in one of the columns he's written today that that's what the British media do, and now Lewis won't say anything for the next few months because he'll know better, and I understand that, but I think I don't think Lewis did himself any favours in terms of how we, both the media and the fans, perceive him after that incident.
Okay, sorry, you probably didn't hear that. Yeah, it's all right. I think we've said it all, haven't we? I mean, the race really wasn't about Lewis Hamilton, was it? And we're all talking about Lewis Hamilton because of what he said. I mean, the top three, Vettel, Alonso and Button, was a fantastic performance, wasn't
absolutely,
it?
Yeah.
No, well, I'm just going to step in here for a second because Rob, earlier you were talking about the curves, the DRS, and the tyres that go off and things like that. You find very confusing and you don't like them. Damien, you mentioned something earlier. I think you actually got some figures with you, which is all very organised. Some of us might not like all these gimmicks, as some people have called them, but it turns out quite a few people do.
Yeah, the BBC have released some viewing figures for the Monaco Grand Prix and for the Spanish Grand Prix, and it does. It's worth recording what they've said. Monaco, 15-minute peak audience of 6.1 million people, which is the best recorded for years, and an increase of 400,000 on last year's race. And more notably for me, the Spanish Grand Prix, which is a race we've always known, there's no racing at usually, this year recorded a peak of 6.2 million. So that's even more than Monaco. And that's a huge 1.2 million up on the 2010 Spanish Grand Prix. So I guess that says something about the appeal, the story that Formula One is creating this year, despite the fact we don't really have a championship to talk about in terms of Vettel winning.
We will.
Okay,
we'll come on to this later. I think I've got a reader's question here, so we'll go on to that in a bit.
But to the mass audience, which is very important to the sport and to the sponsors and to the teams, essentially. There's the report from their side is there's not much wrong with what's going on. We might have different views as purists, I guess, and as enthusiasts, but there is a good underlying story to every race this year.
Yeah, well, it's certainly good news for the sport. Damien, I'm sure a lot of the viewers saw the race over in America, but a lot happened in it, and certainly the last lap. Can you just run us through how on earth Dan Weldon won when he wasn't even leading at the last corner.
Yeah, well, in our May issue, which we celebrated the Indy 500 centenary, we had a great story about dramatic finishes, and I think if we're doing that story today, this one would have made the list. There's no doubt about it. Very impressive young rookie J.R. Hildebrand, an American of all things, leading on the last lap of the 500, goes to lap Charlie Kimball around the final turn. I'm not quite sure what Kimball was doing. He was very slow on the racing line, so Hildebrand had to go round him and basically just lost grip offline and smacked the wall. Just how he must have felt the morning after when he woke up to realise he'd lost the 500 by a couple of hundred yards, and he kept his foot in and managed to cross the line, but unfortunately for him, Weldon swept past him and took an unlikely victory. Incredible stuff.
Absolutely gutting moment, as you said, for him. But I mean, watching the race, I think it wasn't just down to the fastest drivers this year, was it? It was a lot of it was to do with fuel strategy. I mean, a bit of a shame for some people who want to see, the outright quickest people winning.
Yeah, I think you always want to see a race won on pace, but this was one of those races that came down to fuel strategy, and Hildebrand was eking out the last few drops of fuel to get across the line, which is why he'd backed off heavily on that last lap, and Weldon was closing in fast. But the race was actually dominated by the Ganassi pair, Dario Franchitti and Scott Dixon, and probably the fair result in terms of pace, it would be one of those two that would have won the race. But that's the way Indy works. It's a 400 miler.
Yeah, I mean, Rob, looking at some of the footage, the onboard footage, of when Hildebrand went into the wall, he doesn't seem to even notice that that's where he was heading. The steering wheel was kind of set on one position. I mean, surely that obviously he's a rookie, as Damien said, but I mean that's a massive mistake to make, isn't it?
I guess it is. Last corner of the last lap, you couldn't write a script like that, could you? My feeling was, I'm not an expert on this, but my feeling was that he didn't need to pass Kimball, did he?
He said after the race the reason why he passed him was he was so marginal of fuel, he didn't want to back off and have the threat of Weldon coming down upon him and also running out of fuel.
Well, yeah, I think
and his spotter was telling him to go around him.
Yes, okay, right, and I think actually also what happened was, if I'm right, is that he got onto the dirt, he got onto the marbles, and he was kind of a passenger. And actually, just to take up you two's, can I say you two's point? Your point about.
You're a writer.
Yes, true. Yeah, I could write it. Fuel strategy at Indy 2011 is part and parcel of what I'm trying to say about Formula One. It's not that I don't like it or I'm whinging about it. I'm delighted it's so popular on the TV, okay? But I want to see a race run as a race, I just want them to race right through to the end, that's all.
Well, obviously talking about the Indy 500 and Rob, your association with Goodwood, we've got a bit of a special treat this year at the Festival of Speed, haven't we?
Yeah, we have, and Lord March was at Indianapolis this past weekend, collecting more drivers and more cars for his event, and I know he spoke to Dan Weldon, so hopefully we might see Dan Weldon at Goodwood. I think it's a good chance, and so yes, it will be good at the Festival of Speed this year because there are going to be more than 30 Indy cars there to celebrate the centenary, and knowing Goodwood, it'll be a hell of a spectacle. It won't just be a bunch of cars in a paddock. There'll be all sorts of things going on as well. And they've got some of the great drivers and some of the great cars. I mean, if you've never been to Indy, it's damn sight easier to get to Goodwood if you're English, and you'll see most of the great cars and drivers there.
And of course, we should mention that if Weldon is there, he should be given a hero's welcome because he's the first Englishman to win 2 Indy 500s, which is, I know it fell into his lap on Sunday, but he was still there to win it, wasn't he? So, he's been up against it for the first year in years. He's been out without a drive this year, and Indy at the moment was down to be his only race, and he joined up with former racer Brian Herter, who's running a team, to drive a car, and what a result for Herter and for Dan, both fully deserving, and I think he deserves a chance to race on for the rest of the year. Hopefully this win will give the sponsors a chance to put some more money in and keep the team going.
I think we should congratulate Graham Rahal too. I think Graham Rahal drove a fantastic race to come in third place on the podium. First year with the Ganassi team, they call it the B team. I'm sure it's not actually, but and last year Bobby Rahal was the columnist for our magazine. So well done, Rahal, I say.
Yes.
Right, Damien, one for you. This is from someone called Jeff Hurst. He says that Stefano Domenicali has said that the title bid is still open. This is after this weekend. I know this is mathematically possible, but surely the other drivers on the grid will now be fighting for second place behind Vettel.
Yeah.
Bit early to say that, or...?
First point is, I don't think it's the Jeff Hurst, because he spells it with a J, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Anyway, I think in terms of the title, it's obviously Vettel's and Red Bull's to lose. I can't really see how they're going to. Rob's got a different opinion, I think, so we'll hear from that in a second. I mean, basically, the way I'm looking at this season from now on is race by race, just looking at it as pure entertainment for Grand Prix, and who comes out on top and who can notch up Grand Prix wins. Championship points, I've kind of stopped looking at in terms of who wins it. I think it smacks a little bit of Jenson Button in 2009, building up a big lead, and in the second half of the season, can the opposition come back at him? We'll see. I think anything can happen. It's basically the equivalent of 2 wins with Vettel not finishing to be 8 points behind, essentially, which is quite a lot to ask for, because so far the Red Bulls have been pretty reliable, apart from their KERS reliability problems. So all that Sebastian needs to do is just keep finishing top 3, doesn't it?
Yeah. Rob, you're itching to say something. better be good now.
I'm not itching to argue with the editor, actually. I just want to make a quick point, which is that if you remember, we all thought Jenson Button was going to win the World Championship before the middle of 2009. And actually, at the end of the year, he only just made it with a scary-looking drive at Interlagos. That's the first thing. Secondly, if the FIA does ban the hot exhaust gas being an aerodynamic device, which is what they're saying it is, then I think Red Bull will be badly affected by that. And thirdly, although he's driving like a world champion, and my goodness, he really is, life just ain't like that. He won't keep on winning every race, I don't think. And I think we'll have a battle for the championship. I'm very, very ready to be wrong and bow to my editor. But I think it's not all over yet.
Well, here's hoping, I think. Rob and Damien, thank you very, very much for joining me. We'll all be back next week for another Week in Motorsport.